The mirrors in the bridal suite were too many. No matter where Savannah turned, she couldn't escape the sight of herself. Plain dress, thrift store heels, hair done by her best friend instead of a stylist. She stood surrounded by shimmering chandeliers and champagne flutes, in a room designed for women who had grown up with money, power, and pearls. She had none of those. And it showed. Across the room, her future mother-in-law, Vivian Langford, held up a pair of diamond earrings with a look that could slice through velvet. "These were worn by every Langford bride," she said, her voice tight. "But I suppose they'd look ridiculous with that outfit." There was laughter. Tight, polite, the kind that stings more than cruelty because it hides behind a smile. Her soon-to-be sister-in-law, Blair, didn't bother to lower her voice. "She's brave, I'll give her that. Walking down the aisle like that, as if we all won't be thinking it." Savannah kept her hands folded. She knew what they saw. A charity case, the girl from the trailer park, the scholarship student, the waitress who had caught the eye of their Ivy League son. She wasn't good enough, and they needed her to know it before the first organ note played. "Is this how your family celebrates weddings?" she asked softly, her voice even. Vivian arched a brow. "We celebrate with discretion, Savannah, which is why I begged Julian to elope. But he said no. Because he's young and foolish, and sometimes men confuse rebellion with romance." That cut deep, but Savannah didn't flinch. She just adjusted the strap of her dress. It wasn't white, it was cream, because white had been too expensive. "You should be thanking me," she said. "At least I didn't bring my family. You'd really have something to whisper about then." Vivian's lip curled. "Do you even have family?" The air went still. Even the stylists, brought in for the bridesmaids, not for her, froze. Savannah felt her throat tighten. She wouldn't give them the story, not today. But she had one. Her mother had died when she was 15. Her father, well, she hadn't seen him since. He'd walked out the day after the funeral and never came back. She had raised herself, finished school with borrowed textbooks and borrowed time, and somehow made it all the way here, just to be told she didn't belong. Blair snapped a photo with her phone. "Let's remember this," she said, smirking. "The moment before our family made a mistake." Savannah finally turned. "You think marrying me is a mistake?" "We think dragging our name through a charity banquet is," Vivian said coolly. "But it's not too late to walk away. Quietly. Before the guests arrive." For a moment, Savannah almost did. She almost picked up her tiny duffel bag, the one tucked under a table skirt, and walked straight out of that overdone palace of white roses and contempt. But then she remembered Julian's eyes when he proposed. The way he had looked at her like she was the future he wanted, not a mistake he'd regret. She breathed in deeply. "You don't have to like me. But I'm marrying him, and if you try to humiliate me again, I'll make sure every camera in that room catches it. And I promise I know exactly how to look wounded in high definition." The room went silent. Vivian's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes narrowed. "You really are from another world." "No," Savannah said. "I just never learned to smile while being stabbed." She walked out of the room, her heels clicking against marble, each step a defiant claim. She didn't see Blair roll her eyes. She didn't hear Vivian mutter something cruel about charity cases. She was too focused on holding it together until she reached the empty hallway. There, just outside the ballroom, she leaned against the wall and exhaled. She was marrying into a family that wanted her gone. Her fiancé hadn't defended her once. He was with his groomsmen, unaware of the storm that had just passed. And she was standing there alone, feeling the weight of a lifetime of absence pressed down like a stone. She whispered, not to anyone in particular, I wish someone, anyone, was here for me. And at that very moment, a sleek black car pulled up outside the glass doors. She didn't see it. Not yet. But someone had heard that whisper, and he had come. The car sat idle, engine humming like a secret waiting to be told. Savannah didn't notice it at first. Her back was pressed to the cool marble wall, eyes closed, breath shaky. The hallway outside the ballroom was empty, but for the low murmur of violins warming up and the muted rustle of staff preparing the kind of wedding she was meant to be grateful for. But something made her look up. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the silence that came just before a life shifted. The driver stepped out of the black car slowly, almost ceremoniously, and walked around to open the back door. A man emerged, tall, gray at the temples but broad-shouldered and clean-cut in a tailored navy suit. He looked like someone used to commanding boardrooms, or countries. For a second, she thought he was a guest who'd gotten lost, until he turned and looked straight at her and smiled. That was when the air left her lungs. "Hello, Savannah," he said, voice low, certain, familiar in a way that made her dizzy. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her arms hung frozen at her sides. "I wasn't sure you'd recognize me," his voice softened. "It's been a long time." She stared at him like he was a ghost. "You're not real," she finally said. "You can't be." "I am." He stepped forward, hands open. "I'm here." "You left." Her voice cracked. "You left the day after Mom's funeral. You didn't write, you didn't call, you just vanished." He flinched, and for a moment the confident air cracked. "I did," he said, "and I've regretted it every day since." "You don't get to regret it now." She straightened, fury rising. "You don't get to walk into my wedding like a savior when you were a ghost every year that mattered." "I didn't come to save you." He held her gaze. "I came to see you. I heard you were getting married. I didn't know how to ask permission to be here." "How did you even find me?" "I have resources," he said carefully, "and connections, and guilt." "That must be nice," she said bitterly, "to have money to fix what your heart broke." He looked down. "The money was never the problem." "No?" she asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it sure looks like you're about to try to solve everything with a check." "I don't expect to be forgiven," he said quietly. "I don't expect to be welcomed. But I wasn't going to miss this day. Not again. Not one more thing. I missed your graduation. I missed your birthdays. I missed you. But I won't miss this." She wanted to scream, to run, to fall into his arms, to punch him, to ask why. But all she could do was stare. "They all think I don't have family," she said. "They think I came from nothing." "You didn't." His voice cracked. "You came from me, and your mother, and we were never nothing. She died thinking you were gone forever. I lived every day with that truth." His hands shook slightly. "But I'm here now. Not for the money, not for the show. For you." She looked away, blinking rapidly. "Why now?" "Because someone sent me the wedding notice, and I realized I couldn't stand behind another glass wall pretending I was a different man. I wanted you to know I'm still alive, still ashamed, still trying. You don't get to just drop back in and be my dad again." "I know." His voice was steady. "But I hoped I could be the man who stands in the back and claps, or who walks you down the aisle if you don't have anyone else." Savannah opened her mouth. Closed it. Her chest ached. Not from anger anymore, but from the ache of almost believing him, of wanting to believe him. She turned to look at the ballroom door. "They've made it very clear I don't belong here." He followed her gaze. "Then maybe it's time someone reminded them who you are." She blinked at him. "And who's that?" "My daughter," he said. the strongest person I've ever failed. And just like that, something in her cracked. Not completely, not enough to heal, but enough to let the first flicker of possibility in. Enough to let him follow her into the building. For now, the ballroom was a cathedral of wealth. Glass chandeliers, silk tablecloths, gold-trimmed everything. Savannah had walked into it earlier with her chin high, heart guarded, and now she entered again. But this time, the air shifted. Not because of her, but because of the man who walked 3 steps behind her. He didn't wear flash. No designer logos, no security entourage, just presence, the kind that made people pause mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. Heads turned in synchronized disbelief. Vivian Langford was the first to notice. Her fingers froze around a flute of champagne, eyes narrowing at the tall man approaching like a slow-moving storm. "Who is that?" she whispered to her husband, Reginald. Savannah heard it. And for once, she smiled. "You were wondering if I have family," she said, stopping a few feet from them. "Turns out I do." Vivian scoffed. "You invited someone last minute? At my wedding venue?" "No invitation," Savannah replied. "He came anyway." Her father stepped forward, extending a hand. "I'm William Merritt." The Langfords blinked, then blinked again. Reginald's eyes widened. "William Merritt of Merritt Holdings?" "One and the same," William said, smile polite but razor-edged. "Chairman, founder, father." "You're her father?" Vivian's voice dropped an octave. "But that's not possible. Savannah said she hadn't seen her family in years." "And that's true," he replied, "which makes this moment all the more overdue." Silence blanketed the space. A bridesmaid choked slightly on her mimosa. A groomsman leaned sideways to whisper something that sounded an awful lot like he's on the Forbes list. William's eyes swept the room, never lingering, never gloating, but observing with calm precision. "I wanted to meet the people welcoming my daughter into their family," he said, "though from what I hear, the welcome's been rather cold." "Mr. Merritt," Vivian said, regaining composure with practiced charm. "Of course we didn't know. I mean, if we'd realized Savannah had such distinguished lineage—" "She doesn't need me to be distinguished," he interrupted. "She already is." Savannah stood a little taller. For once, her voice didn't shake. "You made jokes about my dress, my shoes, my background, but you never once asked about my story." "Because," Vivian snapped, "we expected transparency when someone joins our family." "And I expected decency," William said sharply. "If I'd known she'd be treated like a stray dog in a ball gown, I'd have bought this venue myself and turned it into a soup kitchen." Reginald flushed. "Now listen, there's no need for—" "There is," William said, "because it's not just about Savannah. It's about what you assumed. That money makes someone valuable, that a woman without status has no worth, and I'm here to remind you that her worth was never up for your judgment." Around the room, murmurs rose. People straightened in their chairs. A few guests looked embarrassed. Even Blair, the sister-in-law, had the decency to look vaguely ashamed. "What exactly do you want?" Vivian asked stiffly. "An apology?" William's voice dropped, quieter and stronger. "I want you to think about the fact that the girl you mocked built her entire life without a cent from me. She survived. She succeeded. She made it to this day with grace and grit you'll never understand. That is what you almost threw away." Savannah turned to her father. "You can stop now." He looked at her, surprised. "I have something to say myself." She stepped toward Vivian and Reginald, voice clear. "You tried to make me feel small, but all you did was show me how big I've become. I don't need your approval. I need your son's respect. And if he can't give me that, then this wedding won't happen." A gasp swept the room. Vivienne's face paled. "You wouldn't dare!" "Try me," Savannah said. She turned back to William. "Thank you for showing up, but I'm not a damsel in distress. I'm a bride deciding who deserves to stand beside me." For the first time, William smiled like a father. "That's my girl." Julian stood near the altar, adjusting his cufflinks for the third time when the whispers began. They slithered down the aisle like static, reaching him in fragments. "Did you see who just walked in? That's William Merritt, Savannah's father, billionaire." It didn't make sense. Savannah had told him years ago she had no father, that he'd left, that it was just her and the echo of her mother's absence. He looked toward the back of the ballroom, trying to spot her. What he saw instead was his mother's pinched expression, his father's forced smile, and his bride, his fiancée, standing beside a man who looked like he owned the building. And maybe he did. Savannah's dress hadn't changed. Neither had her shoes. But something in her posture had. She wasn't the girl he'd met in the library, the one who was shy about where she came from. She stood like someone who had finally remembered what she was worth, and it made Julian nervous. He stepped down from the platform just as she approached, the crowd parting like a sea around her. She met his eyes, and something in him flickered. "Savannah," he said, trying to keep his voice even. "I didn't know." "That I had a father?" she said flatly. "Neither did I, until an hour ago." This is a lot." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm just trying to process." "You had plenty of time to process your family humiliating me," she said. "You didn't need a billionaire to make that real." He flushed. "I didn't ask them to, but you didn't stop them." Her voice was cool. "You stood by while they tore me down, while they laughed at my shoes. You let them treat me like I was nothing." "I didn't know what to say," he admitted. "They've always been that way. Controlling, sharp-tongued. I thought if I just kept the peace—" "You chose peace with them over respect for me," she said. "And now that someone powerful is on my side, you suddenly want to talk. That's not fair." "No," she said. "It's not. But it is true." He reached for her hand. "Savannah, I love you. I always have. I didn't know your dad was someone like him." She pulled her hand away. "Stop, just stop." Around them, the crowd shifted awkwardly, pretending not to listen. But everyone was. "You loved me when I was nobody," she said. "That's what I thought. But now that I'm suddenly somebody, you're flustered. You're calculating. You're looking at me like I'm a stranger." "That's not it." "Then look me in the eyes," she said, "and tell me you'd marry me tomorrow if my father had stayed gone, if I still had nothing but a thrift dress and a tiny apartment." He hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Her shoulders fell. "That's what I thought." "Savannah, please." "You're not cruel, Julian, I know that. But you're spineless. And I can't marry someone who flinches when he's asked to stand tall." William stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this now," he murmured. She shook her head. "Number I do. I need to know that the man I marry sees me, not my past, not my dress, not my father's money. Me." Julian looked at her like he was trying to find the girl he used to know. "I do see you." "Too late," she said softly, "because when I needed you to speak, you stayed silent." She turned from him, walked past the aisle. And somewhere in the crowd, applause broke out. Not loud, not cruel, just honest. A few people stood. A few smiled. Her courage had said what so many had long buried. She wasn't a bride anymore. She was a woman reclaiming her voice. And Julian, despite the tux, the ring, the vows he'd never say, was just another man who couldn't hold her strength. The double doors of the ballroom remained open behind her, but Savannah didn't look back. Her heels clicked with purpose down the long marble corridor, echoing like punctuation after everything she had said. Guests murmured behind her, some scandalized, some strangely moved. But she didn't care. For the first time in days, she didn't feel like she was trapped in someone else's fairy tale. This wasn't a wedding anymore. It was an awakening. Her father followed quietly, a respectful distance behind. He didn't speak until they reached the coat check, where Savannah stopped and let her shoulders slump for the first time. She looked down at her hands, still slightly trembling. "I didn't think I'd actually do that," she whispered. William gently cleared his throat. "I did." She turned to him. "You barely know me. But I know strength when I see it, and I know the sound of a woman who's done pretending." Her lips trembled. "I just walked away from everything I thought I wanted." "Then maybe it wasn't what you really wanted." She blinked at him. "What if this is all a mistake? What if I let pride ruin something that could have worked?" "Savannah," he said softly, "that wasn't pride. That was truth, and truth always sounds louder when it finally finds a voice." She sat on a nearby bench, lifting the hem of her dress to rub her sore ankle. "It wasn't even supposed to be a fancy wedding. I just wanted to belong, just once, to feel like I fit in." William sat beside her. "You've outgrown fitting in. That's why they were so threatened. They made me feel so small. And still," he said, gesturing behind them, "you left with your head high." She smiled faintly, wiping beneath one eye. "I was terrified. You did it anyway. That's courage." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world felt oddly quiet outside the chaos of what had just happened. "You know," he continued, "you don't have to go back to that tiny apartment. I could help you, set you up with something better, give you—" "No," she said gently. "Not yet. I need to earn the next part of my life. I don't want it handed to me, not even from you." He nodded slowly, clearly proud. "Then let me help in a way that doesn't cost you your dignity." She raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" "The building on Main and Fairview. It's empty. Needs work. Used to be a co-op art space. I own it." "Okay. You always said you wanted to open something one day. A bookstore, a cafe, a place where people like you, like your mom, could gather." Her eyes widened. "You remember that?" "It's all I ever remembered," he said. "I wasn't a good father, but I listened, even from afar." She hesitated. "I don't want to be seen as a girl who got dumped and ran home to Daddy's checkbook." "Then don't," he said. "Be the woman who got up in front of a crowd, declared her worth, and walked out with her spine intact, and built something from it." Her throat tightened. "You really think I could?" "You already did." He stood and offered her his hand. "Let's go take a look. No promises, just keys and possibilities." She looked up at him, her heart softening in ways she hadn't expected. "Okay," she said quietly. "Let's see where this goes." As they stepped outside, the sky had shifted into late afternoon amber. The world was still turning, even without the wedding. Cars passed, people walked by, and Savannah felt the strangest thing. Relief. She hadn't lost everything. She had traded something hollow for something honest. And just maybe, her story was only beginning now. The car ride was quiet, but not tense. Savannah sat in the passenger seat, still in her not-quite-white wedding dress, with a borrowed coat from the coat check draped over her shoulders. The fabric smelled like cedar and old perfume, someone else's memory clinging faintly to her skin. Her father drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on his knee. He didn't fill the silence with apologies or explanations. He let it breathe. That, more than anything, told her this wasn't a man looking to make things up with grand gestures. He was simply showing up. Finally. When they turned onto Main and Fairview, Savannah blinked at the sight. The building stood like a relic from a better decade. Bricks worn but strong, tall windows clouded with dust. A faded sign still clung above the door. The Gathering House. Used to be an artist's co-op, William said. Your mother used to paint here when she was in college. That's how we met. Savannah turned to him slowly. You met here? He nodded. She was painting a mural on the back wall. I was dragged to some community fundraiser. I remember watching her for 10 straight minutes before I had the courage to speak. What did you say? He smiled faintly. Is that supposed to be a horse or a very tired dog? Savannah laughed for the first time that day. And she didn't throw paint at you? She said, It's a horse, but it's tired, so you're not wrong. They got out of the car, her heels crunching softly on the gravel lot. He produced a key from his coat pocket and handed it to her. Your turn. Her fingers hesitated, hovering over the keyhole. Then she turned it. The door creaked open, and stale air greeted them, laced with time and disuse. Dust motes spun in the golden afternoon light. The space was larger than she expected. High ceilings, wood beams, long-forgotten paintings leaning against the far wall. No one's been in here in years, she murmured. It's yours if you want it, on one condition. She turned to him, wary. What? You don't have to call me Dad yet, he said, but you do have to make this place into something that feels like you. She stepped farther inside. Her heels clicked against the hardwood, then muffled as she crossed a rug curled at the corners. There were old chairs stacked in one corner, forgotten mugs on a dusty shelf, and a single stained glass window that cast a rainbow across the wall. It's not perfect, he said behind her, but it's full of ghosts, some good, some worth chasing away. She ran her hand along the old reception desk. It's got bones. And stories, he said, and you're good at giving stories a place to land. She paused. Why now? Because I finally realized that money doesn't mean much if you can't share it with someone who still has a soul. She turned to face him fully. You missed a lot. I know. And I'm not ready to forgive all of it. I wouldn't trust you if you did. She studied the space one more time. Then let's not talk about the past today. Agreed. Today, she said, we plan a future. He smiled. You've got your mother's voice when you say things like, that. Let's hope I've got her stubbornness, too. She stepped to the center of the room, spun slowly in a full circle. This place smells like potential. That's because it is, he said. She looked down at her dress, creased now, the lace fraying slightly at the hem, and exhaled. First things first, I need boots, then paint. I'll drive, he said. No chauffeurs, no staff. Just us, and maybe coffee. Coffee first, she said. Then I'll figure out how to turn this place into something the world actually needs. Like what? A haven, she said. For women like me. Girls who almost gave up. People who need to see beauty again, even when they've been bruised by it. Her father didn't answer. He just nodded, quietly moved. And together they stepped back into the fading sunlight, two broken halves of a long story, finally writing a new chapter side by side. The next morning, Savannah arrived with a thermos of coffee, a grocery bag full of cinnamon rolls, and a hardware store receipt long enough to paper a wall. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt tied at the waist, her hair in a messy bun, and her eyes brighter than they'd been in weeks. The wedding was yesterday, but it already felt like another lifetime. William was already inside the building, sleeves rolled up, moving paint cans into a neat row. He looked up when she entered, and for a second, something like wonder crossed his face. "You look like your mother," he said softly. "Not just in the face, in the way you walk in like a storm that already knows where it's going." "Let's hope I know how to pick a paintbrush better than she did," Savannah joked, setting the bag down. "She once painted a flower that looked like a bowl of spaghetti," William grinned, "but she made people believe it was art." Savannah smiled, but there was a pang in it. "I miss her so much it still takes my breath away sometimes." "So do I," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Every day. For a while, they worked in companionable silence. Savannah chose a rich cream for the walls, something warm without being loud. She patched up holes, sanded rough edges, and opened every window she could. Sunlight streamed in, catching swirls of dust and decades-old memories. William moved slower than she did, more careful, but just as committed. When the first brush stroke hit the wall, it felt like a kind of ceremony, not for perfection, but for possibility. "So," she said, dipping the roller again, "what do we call this place?" "The Gathering House is a strong name." "But it's not just about gathering," she said. "It's about rebuilding, about rising." He watched her. "Then you name it. This is your story now." She stepped back, looked at the freshly coated wall, and whispered, "Second light." He nodded. "Because after the first light breaks you, the second one heals." Exactly. They painted until the sun dipped low, until their arms ached and their hands were freckled with color. At one point, William disappeared into a side room and came out with a dusty box. "I found this in the storage closet. Thought you might want to see?" She opened it and gasped. Dozens of old photos, her mother in her 20s, covered in paint, laughing with friends. A few black and white flyers for poetry readings and community dinners. One photo of her mother, pregnant, smiling, hand on belly. "She came here even when I was inside her," Savannah murmured. "You were already part of this place," William said. She set the photo beside the windowsill and exhaled. "This feels more like home than anywhere I've lived in years." "Then we're doing something right." "Next week," she said, "I want to invite women from the shelter to help us paint. Let them leave a mark on the walls. Make this theirs, too." William smiled. She'd be proud of that. "I hope so." Savannah stood in the center of the room, spinning slowly to take it all in. Maybe this was always the story. Not the wedding, not the dress, but this, a woman, a building, a second chance. William joined her, their reflections caught in the old glass like ghosts rediscovering themselves. "You were never lost," he said, "just waiting for the right map." She looked at him, eyes soft. "You think we'll get there?" "We're already on the road," he said, "and this time we're not taking separate cars." She laughed. "Just don't expect me to let you pick the music." "Deal," he said, and for the first time, they both laughed without a hint of pain beneath it. By Friday, the whispers had turned into phone calls, and the phone calls into visits. The local newspaper had picked up the story. Runaway bride restores forgotten art space with billionaire father. The headline made Savannah cringe, but the effect was undeniable. People came, some out of curiosity, others with sleeves rolled and paintbrushes in hand. Women from the shelter arrived in groups of 3 and 4, uncertain at first. One woman named Teresa wore gloves to hide her trembling hands. Another, Marta, brought her teenage daughter who hadn't smiled in weeks. Savannah greeted each one like an old friend. "This place is yours too," she told them. "No fancy speeches, just walls, light, and the freedom to leave your mark." She handed out rollers, played old soul music through a borrowed speaker, and watched as color bloomed on the once-dead walls. William worked quietly in the background, making coffee runs, fixing a leaky faucet, hanging new curtain rods. Every now and then, he'd catch Savannah looking at the women painting and nodding like she couldn't believe it was real. "You created this," he said softly, "with a broken heart and a gallon of paint." "Feels like I'm just cleaning up my own ruins," she replied. "But at least it's something useful." "It's more than useful." By Sunday, the space no longer felt like an empty building. It pulsed with energy. There was laughter now, soft chatter, shared meals on the floor while the paint dried. One of the women, Cheryl, brought in old frames and began building a wall of light, where everyone could pin up artwork, poems, photos, or simply pieces of their story. Savannah added her mother's photo to the center. That afternoon, a familiar figure stood in the doorway. Julian. He wasn't dressed like he had been on the wedding day. No suit, no silk tie, just jeans and a wrinkled shirt. He held a small box in his hands. She walked over slowly, the buzz of activity behind her softening. "Julian," she said calmly, "didn't expect to see you here." "I almost didn't come," he said. "But then I saw the article, and I don't know. I guess I needed to see for myself." "See what?" "You," he said. "The version of you I was too scared to stand beside." She nodded slowly. "You don't need to say more. I understand now." "No," he said, holding out the box. "I do need to say this. Inside is the ring. I don't want it back. But I also don't want it to stay with me. It doesn't feel like mine anymore." She took the box and opened it. The diamond shimmered under the soft light. "You were kind," she said. "And I know you meant well. But you were never going to fight for me. And I need someone who doesn't hesitate when the world turns against me." "I know," he said, "and I hope you find him." She closed the box and slipped it into her coat pocket. "Goodbye, Julian." "Goodbye, Savannah." He left without fanfare, slipping into the background like a chapter closing itself. William approached minutes later, handing her a mug of tea. "That was him?" "Yeah," she said. "It was over long before I walked away. I just didn't want to believe it." "And now?" She looked around at the women laughing, the streaks of coral and sage on the walls, the faint music still humming in the background. "Now I believe in something bigger. Not someone saving me, but me saving this, a place, a purpose." William squeezed her shoulder. "Then let's keep going." She turned back to the wall of light and picked up a paintbrush. "We're just getting started." It rained the morning of the opening, not a storm, just a steady, whispering drizzle that painted the streets in soft gray. Savannah stood outside the newly painted doors of Second Light, umbrella balanced between her shoulder and ear, taping up the final hand-lettered sign. "All are welcome. No charge, no questions, just come." Behind her the space was warm and alive. The scent of fresh paint had finally faded, replaced by cinnamon rolls, donated coffee, and the faintest trace of lavender from the women who had cleaned every corner. The wall of light had grown into a tapestry, hundreds of pinned notes, drawings, pressed flowers, and fragments of people's hearts. Savannah wore a simple navy dress and scuffed boots, her hair half pinned, half loose. No one cared about perfection here. That was the point. William stood beside the front table, arranging donated books. He'd worn a collared shirt and old jeans, the most dressed down anyone had seen him in public. "You nervous?" he asked, watching her. "Terrified," she said, "but not of failing, just of being seen, and not recognized for who I am now." He smiled. "Anyone who walks through that door will know exactly who you are." By 11 a.m., the first visitors arrived, an older couple from 2 towns over who had seen the article. Then a young woman with 2 kids and a backpack. Then a teenager with paint-stained hands and headphones slung around his neck. They trickled in slowly, then all at once. By noon, the place buzzed like it had always existed. People browsed shelves, sipped coffee, added poems to the wall. In the back, Marta was reading a story aloud to a group of children while Teresa passed around sketch pads. Savannah walked through the space like a conductor, not orchestrating, just encouraging. A girl approached her shyly, no more than 16, with short hair and a sleeve of old bruises peeking from her sweatshirt. "Is it okay if I sit?" she asked. "Anywhere you want," Savannah said. "Do you want something warm?" The girl hesitated. "Maybe tea." Savannah made it herself and brought it over, crouching beside her. "You don't have to explain why you're here." "Good," the girl whispered. "Because I don't know yet." "That's okay," Savannah said. "Sometimes just showing up is the bravest part." The girl nodded and gave the tiniest smile. Savannah sat with her for a moment, then moved on. Every person who entered that day left something behind. A smile, a question, a memory. And every one of them took something too. A sense of belonging. As evening neared, the rain let up and golden light filtered through the windows. William stood by the door with a clipboard. "You had over 130 people walk through today," he said. "That's more than some churches get on a Sunday." "It's not a church," Savannah said. "It's not a shelter. It's not even a business." "Then what is it?" She looked around. "It's proof that healing doesn't need to be quiet. That community can grow out of anything, even rejection. And that broken things can shine again?" "Exactly." A soft cheer rose from the back. Someone had finished a painting. Someone else had found a book they'd once loved as a child. Savannah watched the room and felt tears sting her eyes. "I think this is the happiest I've ever been," she said. William wrapped an arm gently around her shoulder. "You built something with your pain, Savannah. That's the rarest kind of strength. I just didn't want the worst day of my life to be the end of my story." "It isn't," he said. "It was the spark." The front door opened again, and this time, it wasn't a visitor. It was someone carrying a bouquet of wildflowers and a note in a plain white envelope. He handed it to her, said nothing, and left. Savannah opened it carefully. Inside was a single line written in shaky handwriting. "Thank you for not hiding. You helped me come back to life. No name, no return address." She folded it and pinned it to the wall of light. It fluttered quietly in the breeze from the open window. One truth among many, stitched together by grace. The next morning, Savannah arrived early. The city was still asleep, dew clinging to the windows, streets quiet in that gentle hush between night and noise. She unlocked the front door of Second Light and stood in the entrance for a moment, just breathing it in. The air inside was different now. Less of dust and echoes, more of hope and warmth. The wall of light shimmered in the dawn, its layers of hand-pinned confessions and sketches alive with the breath of everyone who had dared to leave a piece of themselves behind. Savannah walked through the space barefoot, her heels in hand. She passed Marta, who had fallen asleep on the couch with her daughter curled beside her. Teresa was setting up tea in the corner, humming something soft. No one was in a rush. The world outside still spun fast. But not here. Not in the house she had rebuilt from the ruins of what was supposed to be her wedding. Her phone buzzed. It was an email. Subject line, "Request for speaking engagement, Women's Empowerment Summit." She read it twice, then smiled faintly and closed it. Another invitation to tell her story. Another chance to say the words out loud. You don't have to be loved to matter. You don't have to be married to belong. But this morning, she didn't need to prove anything. She picked up a paintbrush and returned to the last blank wall in the back room. The one she had saved. The one her mother once painted on. She dipped the brush into a soft golden shade and began to write a single sentence across the top. Let this be the place where no one has to start over alone. Her father entered behind her, carrying 2 coffees and a small brown envelope. Someone dropped this off late last night, he said. Didn't leave a name, just said it was meant for you. She took it gently. Inside were 3 things. A photo of her mother standing beside the original mural in this very room, smiling wide with paint on her cheeks, a tiny silver necklace with a book-shaped pendant, and a note. The handwriting was unmistakably her mother's. You are stronger than even I dreamed, sweetheart, and the world has been waiting for your voice. Use it. Savannah pressed the paper to her chest and let the tears come, quiet and full. William watched her, silent, then reached out and held her hand, not as a father trying to fix the past, but as a man finally willing to walk beside it. That afternoon, the doors opened again. Women, children, strangers turned neighbors, some returning, some new. There was no speech, no ribbon cutting, just community, just stories shared over warm mugs and chalk drawings on the sidewalk. At sunset, Savannah stood in the doorway, looking out at the world beyond. And for the first time in years, she wasn't waiting to be chosen. She was the choice. She was the voice. And she wasn't afraid anymore. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted stories on General Common Tales. If you'd seen her limping down that aisle, would you have stopped it or stayed silent? Tell us in the comments.